So today we are at Chester at Fantasycon 2024, and I've grabbed David Green, and we are in a restaurant called King's Grill. So I'm going to grill him with some questions. Are you ready for that?
I'm born ready to be grilled.
Okay, right. But let's assume that I'm a purple being from Mars who's just landed on Earth. What can you tell us about yourself?
I'm a fantasy writer. I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, and cozy fantasy. I'm the secretary for the British Fantasy Society. I'm a big fan of Middle Earth, as my shirt would suggest. I'm also autistic, and I write a lot about autistic characters and how that presents in the world.
Sounds like you never have a second to be bored.
No, never do.
Yeah, that's great. So that leads me to my next question. So what kind of subgenre do you really like the most, if you have one?
I suppose at the moment it probably is cozy fantasy, but I mean my heart always goes back to epic fantasy. It's such a big playground to explore. The scope is huge. You can weave in so many different subgenres, not just from fantasy but from other kind of thriller. You can bring in a bit of horror. You can bring in mystery. You can it's such a rich playground. But at the moment, I do enjoy cozy fantasy because I think it's a really great sandbox to explore identity in particular, and so we've kind of written about like neurodivergency and that kind of thing. It's a safe environment to explore it in for readers and for writers and for the characters that they're about. So yeah, I mean I like reading it and I like writing it.
Okay, and from your conversations, there's like a fun vibe about you. So how do you integrate that in your writing? It's
So I mean, I read everything out what I'm writing, and I do all the accents as well, which I don't do in public, but I do it when I'm at home when I'm writing. And I try to, particularly with dialogue, I try to make it sound as natural as possible, even in heightened realities and what have you, in heightened worlds. I still try to make that, and then also in the bit when I've kind of got the kind of like a scene down, I try to look at it and say, okay, where can I inject little bits of humour and little bits of the sides? Because I think it's always important, even in like big epic fantasy and stuff, like little bits of humour to puncture scenes. I think Joe Abercrombie does it exceptionally well. He's one of my favourite writers. I think he writes incredibly dark things, but he also punctures it all with brilliant humour.
so I've heard, yeah.
Yes.
So what other tips can you give to writers?
So I mean, always. I think the earlier you show your work to other people is always good. In terms of like alpha readers or beta readers, and this is even before you get to like editors or anything like that. I think at the end of the day, when you are writing something, it's going to be seen by somebody at some point. And if you are looking to get ready for being either going on query with an agent or going to go to an editor, if people have seen that first and they can see it and give you feedback and stuff, because everyone knows the story in the head, everyone knows the characters, but that might not be plain on the page to some people.
Never plain, yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes just letting other people see it at an earlier stage might just help you eke out little bits that need to be on there.
So what about tips for world building?
Tips for world building. So yeah, I like to do like kind of thought experiments. So if you've made a city that is by on a shoreline, for example, so you'd be like, well, obviously it's going to have a dock, and so it's like, so what do they export from the dock? What is close to them? Is there a forest near them? Do they chop timber? Do they export timber? And I kind of do these things and build it this way. But then I also think of it from a character's point of view as well. And one of my kind of key things is always everything starts with character first. And I think about what is the character's biggest fear, what is their biggest challenge, and I try to construct a world based on that. But with cozy fantasy as well, it's the same. What is their biggest challenge? And I try to think of like things that will be a roadblock for them at an appropriate level for the genre.
Do stories come to you like or the ideas come spontaneously and then you build it, or is it like a conscious process?
Yeah, I think sometimes it changes. Like, you know, sometimes like I'll get like I have an idea for an epic fantasy, which is more of a new one, which is more of just a concept of like I want to explore what it means to be a chosen one and what happens. Is it fair to put so much pressure on someone to save the world, and what happens if they reject it off and not fail but reject it and walk away from it, and see what happens. And it's like kind of looking at, so that's like more of a concept, and you know, I'll work out everything like that. But my cozy fantasy it started with the character first, and then I wanted, and because he was an autistic character, I wanted to explore that, and a lot of that is through identity. So it was like, what is going to be important to him, and that kind of like built out that way. So different approaches.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
So what kind of stories or books can we look forward to in future? Maybe next year?
Maybe next year. So I have an ongoing urban fantasy series called Hell in Haven, which I bring out pretty much a book a year in. It's kind of that they're kind of with a small indie press. I have my cozy fantasy that's on submission at the moment with my agent. Hopefully that finds a place. And at the moment, other than that, I am working on a story which is about a fantasy world's first therapist for adventurers in a world where dragons have returned after a long absence. So the therapist is strung along on a adventure with some adventurers and has to do on-the-job therapy for these characters.
That sounds really like great fun, and I'm sure you enjoy writing them too. So good luck with all your future projects, and thank you for talking to me.
No problem, thanks so much.
Okay, see you another time.
Yes, definitely.